Welcome to the deep dive. Today we're diving deep into the Enneagram, which is, well, it's this fascinating system describing 9 personality types and how they all connect.
hmm
Think of it as a way to understand not just what we do, but why we do it, those core motivations. We'll also look at, growth and stress reactions.
Exactly. It's a really dynamic way of looking at the psyche. And for this, we've pulled together quite a bit of material. We've got descriptions of types 1, 2, and 3, some insights into relationships, the spiritual side of it, different takes on how the whole system works.
So things like centers, wings.
Yeah, centers, wings, instincts, we'll touch on those. The main goal today is really to get under the skin of types 1, 2, and 3, see how they might interact, and just understand the Enneagram better as like a tool for self-discovery.
Okay, sounds good. Let's unpack this then, starting with type 1, the reformer, sometimes called the perfectionist. What's really going on there beyond just wanting things right?
Well, at their core, type 1s are driven by this deep desire for goodness, for integrity, balance, and their basic fear. It's being bad or corrupt, fundamentally flawed.
Okay.
This fear often shows up as that inner critic, right? With what the Enneagram calls their ego fixation, resentment. They hold on to this idea of how things should be, and, well, that can become a trap, this relentless pursuit of perfection.
Right.
But the flip side, the virtue when they're healthy, is serenity, finding peace even when things aren't perfect.
What I found really interesting in the sources was this idea that while they value logic, there's this powerful gut feeling underneath.
Yes, that's a great point.
It's like they feel what's right
Yeah.
instinctively, and then their brain works overtime to justify it logically. They're not just thinking. They feel this mission, this need to act.
That's spot on. And this internal drive often means they push back against their own spontaneous urges. They feel this need to control those impulses to live up to their ideals.
So lots of internal conflict.
Yeah, it can create a lot of tension. Repressing natural desires, which can bubble up as resistance or even aggression if standards aren't met. You might see this really controlled exterior, but inside, well, one source called it a cauldron of passions.
Wow, okay. So what does a healthy type 1 look like then?
When they're doing well, those strong principles become real strengths. They're purposeful, self-controlled in a good way, and that perfectionism turns into a drive for quality and ethics. They bring commitment, high standards, which can also show up in relationships, valuing fairness.
Okay, relationships. Let's talk about how a type 1 might interact with, say, a type 2, the helper. Sources hinted at potential friction there?
It can be tricky. A type 1, focused on what's right and efficient, might see the two's strong emotional focus and offers of help as, well, maybe a bit much, or even as neediness. They might not get why the two needs to feel needed so much. And the two, who thrives on appreciation and connection, might feel judged or unseen by the one's emotional restraint.
Yeah, I can see that.
And the one's advice, meant to be helpful, can land like criticism.
So it's like they speak different languages of care.
Yeah.
The one wants to fix the problem, the two wants to nurture the person.
Exactly. The conflict often boils down to who needs help and what help even looks like. The one might see the two as interfering, not practical, while the two feels the one is cold, critical, unappreciative. If they don't understand this difference, it can really create distance. Resentment builds.
Okay. What about a type 1 with a type 5, the observer? They both seem more reserved, rational, maybe a better fit?
You'd think so, right? They can connect intellectually because of that shared value for logic and restraint. But that very restraint, it can make it really hard to talk about feelings or deep desires, even though they're definitely there.
Okay. So the shared trait becomes a barrier.
It can. The challenge often comes when the one's strong sense of how things should be starts to feel intrusive to the 5, who really values their autonomy and private space.
And the 5's response.
Typically to withdraw, pull back into their own world, which unfortunately the one might see as the 5 not measuring up, leading to more judgment from the one and more isolation for the 5, a difficult cycle.
Right. Okay, let's switch gears then. Type 2, the helper or giver. What's their core motivation?
For a 2, the absolute core desire is to feel loved, to be accepted. And the flip side, the basic fear, is being unwanted, unworthy of love. This fear really fuels their ego fixation, which is flattery trying to win people over by focusing on their needs. And the trap for a 2 is subtle. It's this idea that they need to be indispensable to others to feel free to be themselves, which is a bit of a paradox, isn't it?
Yeah, definitely.
Their virtue, when healthy, is humility, a genuine recognition of their own needs alongside others.
Our sources paint 2s as often incredibly warm, empathetic, generous, really driven by connection,
Yeah.
but maybe sometimes too driven, getting overly involved, maybe struggling to voice their own needs.
That's a really good summary. There's often a genuine desire to help, absolutely. But it can get tangled up with a need to see themselves as helpful, as essential. Their sense of worth is strongly tied to being generous, doing good, love, closeness, family, friendship. These are huge values. We saw that example of the type 2 minister, just finding immense joy in nurturing her community, loving people. It felt core to her being.
It sounds like when they're healthy, they can be incredibly positive forces.
Oh, absolutely. Healthy twos are genuinely unselfish, altruistic, really capable of unconditional love. They're loving, considerate, generous. They just draw people in. They help others see their own good qualities, kind of the embodiment of the ideal good parent energy.
But like all types, there's the shadow side, as the sources call it.
Yes. For twos, this can look like pride, but it's often hidden behind that helpful exterior. There can be self-deception, minimizing their own needs while pouring energy into others. This can lead to getting too involved, maybe even manipulating situations, often unconsciously, just to get that feeling of connection and being needed.
And if they don't get it.
Well, when they're less healthy, they might constantly sacrifice themselves seeking validation, but then secretly feel really angry or resentful when they feel unappreciated or taken for granted. That putting others first can come at a cost.
So thinking about relationships again, specifically with a type 1, what are some growth areas for a type 2?
Okay, for a 2 with a 1, it's really key for the 2 to notice if they have trouble receiving help. Or if they tend to get overly involved, offer advice when it's not asked for. Things that might push a 1 away. Managing their own emotional reactions is big too.
And appreciating the 1.
Yes, recognizing the 1's commitment, their sense of responsibility, those high standards, seeing the good intentions there. Growth involves finding balance in giving and receiving, respecting the 1's independence, being open to suggestions, and crucially, learning to clearly and calmly state their own needs.
Okay, great. Let's move to our third type for today. Type 3, the achiever or performer. What drives them?
The core desire for a 3 is all about feeling valuable, worthwhile. Their deepest fear, being worthless, insignificant. This fear powers their ego fixation, vanity, meaning they're very concerned with their image, how they appear to others. The trap is efficiency, or rather the belief that they have to perform to be efficient and successful just to have value.
And their virtue.
Truthfulness, being authentic, being honest with themselves and others about who they are behind the achievements.
The sources often describe 3s as confident, charming, ambitious, energetic. They seem to really excel, but also may be prone to being status-conscious workaholics.
That's the classic picture. And when healthy, 3s are amazing achievers. They often become role models, really inspiring people with their competence and drive. They embody qualities society tends to value,
But that drive comes from.
often from that deep fear of being seen as a nobody, of having no inherent worth. So they chase success, often defined by whatever their family or culture values, to constantly prove they are somebody, to avoid that feeling of worthlessness.
So their self-worth gets really tied up in what they do rather than who they are.
Exactly. And in that rush to achieve, they can lose touch with what they truly want, their own feelings. There's a real risk of self-deception, of becoming very good at playing a role, even if it doesn't feel authentic inside. One source suggested many 3s got this message as kids, maybe subtly, that their feelings didn't really matter, but their accomplishments did. Acceptance was conditional. Attention for performing became like oxygen.
So when a 3 is really thriving, at their best, what does that look like?
Healthy 3s are self-accepting, authentic. The drive is still there, but it comes from a place of genuine self-worth, not a desperate need for applause. They become truly inspiring because they lead with integrity, connected to their real values.
And what are some key things a type 3 can work on for personal growth?
A big one is cultivating that internal sense of self-acceptance, separate from achievements, prioritizing truthfulness, being real about their feelings, their vulnerabilities, resisting the need for that perfect image all the time, developing genuine empathy and cooperation, not just competition, and really importantly, taking breaks, stepping off the hamster wheel to reconnect with themselves, figure out their core values, not just chase what looks good or gets approval.
This is a great look at types 1, 2, and 3. But you mentioned earlier, the Enneagram is bigger than just the types themselves. Can you give us a quick rundown of those other components?
Absolutely. So first, you have the three centers of intelligence. There's the instinctive center, that's types 8, 9, and 1, primarily dealing with anger. Then the feeling center, types 2, 3, and 4, focusing on shame and image. And the thinking center, types 5, 6, and 7, grappling with fear and anxiety.
And each type handles that core emotion differently.
Exactly. Then you have wings. These are the types right next door on the Enneagram circle. Most people lean towards one wing more than the other, and it adds flavor to their core type. Like a type 9 could have a one wing, making them maybe a bit more structured, or an 8 wing, giving them a bit more assertiveness.
Okay, and levels of development, you mentioned those briefly.
Right. Within each type, there are 9 levels, usually grouped into healthy, average, and unhealthy ranges. They basically show a spectrum of how that type manifests, based on self-awareness and presence. Moving up means more present, more integrated. Moving down means more caught up in the ego's patterns.
Makes sense.
And those lines on the diagram, they show the directions of integration and disintegration. Integration is where you go when you're growing, adopting positive traits of another type. Disintegration is where you might go under stress, showing less healthy traits of a different type.
Can you give an example?
Sure. For type 1, growth integration looks like moving towards the positive, spontaneous side of type 7. Stress disintegration can look like moving towards the moody, withdrawn side of type 4. For type 2, growth is towards 4, stress towards 8. For type 3, growth to 6, stress to 9.
Got it. And one more concept. Instincts.
Yes, the instincts are subtypes. There are 3. Self-preservation, focusing on security, resources, well-being. Sexual or intimacy, focusing on one-to-one, connection, intensity, and social, focusing on groups, belonging, contribution. We all have all 3, but one is usually dominant, one secondary, one less developed. And that dominant instinct really shapes how your core type shows up.
So self-preservation one is different from a social one.
Definitely. The self-preservation one might focus their perfectionism on having a perfectly organized, secure home. The social one might focus more on upholding moral standards in their community or reforming social systems. It adds another layer of nuance.
It really is multi-layered.
Mhm.
I also found the historical roots interesting and how it's being used more for personal, even spiritual growth now.
Yeah, it does have links to various ancient traditions, and there's definitely been a resurgence, using it for self-discovery. Books like The Wisdom of the Enneagram or The Road Back to, you really lean into that. Many see its real power in shining a light on our shadow side, those unconscious patterns, and offering a path towards becoming more whole, more authentic. It's a journey towards understanding yourself and others better, which doesn't have to be religious necessarily, more about inner connection.
And we should probably mention the tests and the whole question of validity.
Right. There are tests, like the Rady, that try to help you pinpoint your type based on questionnaires about attitudes, behaviors. Lots of people find them a useful starting point. But the scientific validation is still kind of debated. Some studies show correlations with other personality models, like the Big Five, but it's not universally accepted as like a rigorously validated psychometric tool. Some consider it pseudoscience because of that lack of robust empirical backing.
So take the test results with a grain of salt.
Pretty much. It's often better to use the test as a starting point than read the descriptions deeply and see what truly resonates with your own lived experience. Self-reflection is key.
Okay, so as we wrap up this deep dive, what are the main takeaways you want people listening to have about the Enneagram, especially types 1, 2, and 3?
I think the biggest thing is that the Enneagram offers this really rich way to understand not just behavior, but the why behind it, the core motivations, the core fears. Looking at types 1, 2, and 3, we see such distinct driving forces, and understanding those can give you incredible insight into yourself and your relationships.
Yeah, it really does feel like a tool for building self-awareness and maybe even more compassion for why people act the way they do.
It absolutely can be. I'd encourage you, the listener, to think about which type, or maybe aspects of each type we discussed, really struck a chord with you. How might thinking about wings or levels or instincts add more understanding to your own patterns? And if you want to go deeper, those books we mentioned, Personality Types, The Wisdom of the Enneagram, The Road Back to You, are great resources.
Definitely. And maybe the question to leave you with is this. Thinking about your own personality, your deep down motivations, or maybe your key relationships, what might become clearer if you look at it through this Enneagram lens. We've really only scratched the surface today. Thanks for exploring it with us.